All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Life Between the Sticks. MLS preview time. We are less than a week away from the MLS season kicking off. And what better way to do predictions, Cody, than to bring in a friend, a guest?
Yes, we have Eli joining us from This Week in MLS. Eli, welcome.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm so stoked for the season to kick off. This is going to be an absolutely legendary year for the league.
I would agree. I think that there's going to be a lot of change, a lot of up and down. And it's something that I think from a player's perspective, I'm very excited for. And I think I can speak for both yourself and Brandon from a fan's perspective. It's also going to be something that, is very intriguing to watch.
Oh, well, 1,000%.
Well, no pressure, MLS, as I dive in for the first time. Apparently this is going to be epic, so I'm excited. What we're going to be running through today specifically, we're going to go over the Eastern Conference, kind of standings, obviously the Western. We'll talk about the Supporter Shield, the U.S. Open Cup, CONCACAF Champions League, Leagues Cup, Canadian Champs, playoffs, and some individual awards. So we're going to go quick on some things. Like if it's boring, hey, we'll move on. If it's an obvious thing, we'll move on. But we've got a lot in this one. So for everybody out there, I had both Eli and Cody fill out these prediction cards. So I'm going to be using them as we kind of head into this and kind of see where they differed and what was interesting. What I do want to remind everybody of as we start with what I'd say is the regular season, we'll go to Eastern Conference to begin. This is definitely where I think we're gonna find some fun back and forth between you two. So Philly won it last year, right? I would say it was close. Montreal in a close second, so 67 points to 65. Then you had NYCFC and New York getting the automatic spots. Cincy in 5th, Miami 6th, Orlando 7th. That was the playoff roster. I guess starting with you, Eli, any big surprises that, shook out last season as you kind of went ahead and put in your top picks on the card?
Yeah, well, I remember everyone last year doubted Montreal, and then they made it all the way to second. And no offense to them, but I'm doubting them this year as well because I think, they lost a lot this offseason. So when you look at the Eastern Conference last year, you mentioned that, Montreal and NYCFC were second and third. I have neither of those teams making the playoffs this year. I think they both lost a lot. Like with NYC losing Sean Johnson and Alexander Collins and, a bunch of players there. So I see those guys dipping. And then I think Cody and I have a certain team really rising this offseason.
That is right.
Yeah.
Cody, I guess who is the what do we say? Like the outsider coming in, the I don't know, the underdog.
Yeah, I mean the outsider coming in, I think
is
the dark horse. Okay, I guess that would be the right term. I think the dark horse this year, for both Eli and I, is Toronto. Obviously, they had a very difficult year last year. Even when they were able to sign Insigne and Bernadeschi, they still struggled because of the odd injury or two to either of them. And then just the fact that they had such a slow start to the season. I do think that having both of those players in throughout preseason, signing Sean Johnson, signing Matt Hedges are all huge additions to Toronto's roster. And I think that is really going to thrust them into a second or third playoff position.
All right. All right. Well, Cody, can you run me through your top 4 from this conference?
Yeah. So I have Philly, Toronto, Cincy, and Nashville finishing in the top 4. I think Cincy started to put the pieces together last year and really, figured out what they needed, who they needed to sign, how they were going to rebuild this franchise. Obviously, having been a part of Cincinnati when I was having been a part of Cincinnati 2 years ago, it was a little bit of I'm going to use the word dumpster fire, to be completely honest. But that said, I think with the transition in leadership, management, coaching, etc. I think that they, like I said, they figured out what they need to do, and the same in Toronto. Really they went out and they signed the right players. Bob Bradley has really brought that group together, and then Philadelphia for me is just Philadelphia. They've kind of been on top of the ball the last couple seasons, and it's finally starting to the ball is finally starting to just fall in their favor.
Eli, back to you on yours as well. Yeah, you had Toronto, but you had another non-playoff team right to the top four on the Eastern side as well, didn't you?
Yeah, well, I had they made the playoff. Oh, Atlanta. You're talking about Atlanta. But I do want to talk about Orlando City real quick because I think Orlando had the best offseason. They just squeaked into the playoffs, even though they were kind of a playoff team all year. They like kind of fell flat at the end of the year, but they added a guy like Martin Ojeda. This team is looking really, really scary, which is why, for some of my season predictions, I'm leaning towards Orlando in certain categories. But Atlanta United, I think a huge thing for them is getting Miles Robinson back from injury. Thiago Almada's, getting his second year in MLS. And then also the guy from Celtic that they brought in, I'm just always scared to try to pronounce his name. But he's going to be a big replacement for Joseph Martinez. And, I'm glad that Martinez era is finally over for Atlanta United. He was a club legend, but he was also a cancer for the team over the last couple of years. Yeah. So I think that Atlanta United will be back this year. I'm not sure, just how good they will be, but I think their ceiling is easily a top 4 team in the East.
That's interesting. I agree that they have a very high ceiling. I just don't see it being that high with, where they were last year and all the struggles that they had. However, like you said, I think that the possibility is certainly there, and I'm excited to see what that franchise can do to get back where I think they belong. Yes. But like you said, Joseph Martinez, I'm very glad to see that come to an end, because I think that there was so much toxicity around that entire situation, whether it was the club didn't want him there anymore or he didn't want to be there. It was just, it was just from the outside looking in, it was very toxic. And I think that they've not only brought players in, but I think they've also gotten rid of a few players that they needed to move on from. And I'm excited to see where that franchise can get to this season.
Well, clearly you two agreed on Philly and Toronto being a couple of the top teams in the league. And again, from Toronto going from second up to the bottom to in the top 4 is a rise of all. But as an outsider looking in, when you bring in Insigne and Bernadeschi, like they're obviously very front loaded. Michael Bradley in the midfield behind them with proud father Bob on the sidelines. Yes. You're going to have to see what they have to bring in. And when you bring in a goalkeeper like that, like you can understand that a lot of those things are going to start to click for them.
Absolutely.
It's interesting so we did 5 through 10 spot, right? Because we can't really go all the way down. Eli, you had Nashville, Cincy, New York Red Bull, Columbus Crew, Charlotte, and New England. Anyone kind of surprise you, or you maybe are really sold on, or maybe not really sold on in that kind of middle bracket of teams?
Yeah. So Cody mentioned them in his top 3. I love what FC Cincinnati is doing and the growth that they've had over the last couple of years. My only reservation on them is just the fact that like Brenner is most likely going to leave over the summer. And I don't know how that's going to affect them, who they're going to be able to replace him with, because that's a lot of goal production right there. So that's the reason that I still think they'll make the playoffs, but that's the reason why I didn't have them in my top 4. Otherwise, I'd say like another year building off of what they were last year would get them there. Then I think New England is a team that could surprise us again, because they're just, a year removed or 2 years removed from winning the Supporter Shield. And then they had a really bad fall last year with a bunch of injuries. Bruce Arena ball kind of being the same thing over and over again. But I don't think there's too many surprises in my predictions on the West or on the Eastern Conference. I think more of my surprises will be in the East or in the West. But yeah, those are just some notes that I have of my 5 through 10. And then it's also interesting seeing Nashville back in the in the East after a little.
Yeah, it's such a weird change.
They got
to see
booted?
Nashville. So since they've come into the league, I think they've swapped conferences like 3 times, right, Eli? Because they started out in the East.
West to East.
I'm sorry. As an outsider, you can't convince me that Nashville is a part of any Western Conference. Like, I'm sorry.
But it literally comes down to where the teams are, just like where the line is drawn. So like last year they competed in the West
Again.
and we were flying, me being at Vancouver, we were flying to Nashville for a conference game. And I was, you're getting on this flight for, I don't know, 4.5 hours to fly to play Nashville in a conference game. And you're like, gosh, this is intense. 2 more hours, you're flying to Miami.
Yeah.
It's a lot, but I actually do agree with Eli on the fact of Cincinnati kind of being on the scale, right? Like they could, if Brenner does leave, I think that very much impacts their chances of finishing high. However, if he stays, if that deal does fall through, like Eli said, that's a lot of goal production, whether it's through assists or goals directly, that I think kind of thrusts them into that top 4 position. My only other thing that I will say on that, Eli, is can Brandon Vasquez have another year similar to what he did last year?
And I'm worried about that because there's that feeling that he could be a one-season wonder. We've had many of those type of strikers come and go in MLS where they have that 1 year of getting like 16 plus goals and then they kind of fade away into the background for the rest of their MLS career. But I'd like to hope that Brandon Vasquez, can build off it and can be a consistent number 9 and maybe get into that U.S. men's national team picture that a lot of people want him to. I mean, he has a lot of friends on that national team. So love to see
he does. He has a lot of friends and I think he has a lot of potential because he's still very young. And having played with him during my tenure at FC Cincinnati, it was a lack of confidence. It was the fact that the coaching staff maybe wasn't, giving him that vote of confidence, or he just wasn't. He was missing that one finish in training that kind of ended his day on the wrong foot. And based on everything that I've heard from players that are still at the club, he's now, a little bit more clinical in those sessions at training, and the coaching staff has backed him to be their out and out number 9. And if he can continue to keep his feet underneath him and keep the ball rolling and keep scoring those goals and be a true poacher, that they need, I think that he can get into the national team and really make a splash.
Mm-hmm. So your 5 through 10 included Orlando, Columbus, New England, Charlotte, Atlanta, and New York Red Bull. You both sound like you have some respect for New England in that sense.
Yes.
It sounds like Atlanta, you kind of are taking on a lot of that risk with them just to see what they have. But I guess from your perspective, I want to hear about Columbus and New England from you.
Well, I think Columbus has gone out and signed quite a few pieces that they needed. I think they needed some depth at the striker position, and they definitely went out and got that with Christian Ramirez. Mm-hmm. I think the coaching change will really bring this group closer together. Obviously, they have, what was it, Eli, 3 years ago that they were competing for the MLS Cup? Was it 3 seasons ago?
2020. They
2020. They were flying high, and I think coming off of that, there was just a lot of loss. I don't know if it was player personnel, just like mentality loss, or whether it was Caleb Porter maybe getting a little bit too comfortable in his position there, but they were not the same team going into 2021. And I think that the ownership group kind of hoped that maybe Caleb could get the group back together. However, that didn't happen. They kind of went through a tough or tumultuous 2 years, and now they move on from Caleb. They bring in Nancy, and I believe that they can, or he might be able to bring this group back to, their prime, because they do still have players like Zelarayan and who's the striker up top that I'm thinking
Cucho.
of, Eli?
Yeah, Cucho Hernandez. He's amazing.
Cucho Hernandez. He was at Watford in the Premier League, I believe. These are all big names, and they're very talented names. And I believe that this is definitely a group that can push for the playoffs and kind of get back to their glory of 2019 and 2020.
And then a quick word on the Revs.
Carles Hill. As long as Carles is fit, they will make the playoffs.
Is it that easy, Eli?
Yes, in my opinion, he is far and away the best playmaker in the league. And it's 100%. Unfortunate that we didn't get to see, just how amazing he was with the Revs last year, just because the Revs were pretty mid last year. But, I think this team can only go as far as Heel can take them. And, he's that guy that makes everyone around him better.
Yeah, he does. Having played with him, I can most certainly agree with that. He not only demands the best from himself, but he, like Eli said, he makes those players around him better by demanding the same level. And I don't know if it's a big fish in a small pond kind of mentality, but I believe he is better than the MLS. I think because he has done it he has played in the Premier League and he has played in La Liga. I'm wondering if there is any chance that he could leave. What do you think, Eli?
I do, but I also feel like he's pretty comfortable now in MLS. Yeah. I think he enjoys being there, and I think he likes being the guy. I don't think he would necessarily be that guy if he goes back to Europe. For sure. But I think he wants to just be a household name in MLS right now, which I would be down for because I just love watching him play personally.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I think he's, as Eli said, out and out the best playmaker in this league.
I mean, look, it's Boston. Took a couple years to get used to Duncan. It's not everyone's choice. He's settled now. He figured it out. You got the espresso machine at home. All right, Eli, you're non-relegation zone, but bottom of the Eastern, you have NYC FC, DC United. That's Wayne Rooney's DC United. By the way, I saw a clip from them on social. Almost didn't recognize him, the poor guy.
Yeah. Oh, God. He looks rough.
He does. But, hey, preseason, I bet he's putting in the hours.
Oh, yeah.
Inter Miami, CF Montreal, and Chicago Fire. Wow. This, again, coming from someone who's new to this, obviously DC at last season, NYCFC making as far as they did. You already explained why you think they're dropping so much. Same thing with Montreal. When you don't release your kit like everyone else, Montreal, you deserve to be at the bottom.
Yeah, definitely with Montreal. No kit means no party, no love from me personally. Yes. I'd even rather see a terrible kit than no kit at all, because they're going to be wearing training tops or whatever, which is just laughable. And it sucks how this team feels the need to rebrand every 2 years to make themselves seem good again. Montreal Impact was fine for me. Nothing will ever top the Nacho Piatti days for them. But
could not agree more.
Yeah, he is arguably my favorite player I've ever gone to see play in MLS. Yeah. But aside the point, Chicago Fire, don't need to talk about them. They're hot garbage. They're going to be last.
Will they ever get better? Is it an ownership problem? Because they've been bad for a long time.
It's an everything problem for them, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of just turmoil in and around that franchise.
Well, clearly the only one trying is their design department with their kit,
Yeah. I mean, the fact that they rebranded a few years ago to try and I guess reintegrate themselves with the city. Right. They moved from the old Mapfre to Soldier Field. That's been a disaster of a move the last couple of years. Cause I mean, what was their attendance? Do you think maybe 5,000 to 10,000 on average?
It was pretty bad. I got to go to a Chicago match last year, and yeah, it wasn't great. They did not fill up the stadium. I just want to quickly say, I once went to Chicago and I went to 7 different Chicago sports stores. I saw 0 Chicago Fire merch. 0. Oh. Talk about no presence in your city. And it's inexcusable for the third biggest market in the US to not have a big presence in MLS, Chicago easily has the worst presence.
All right.
Interesting. I would agree with that.
Well, what about Beckham's Inter Miami? No Messi, no party. Is that simple?
I mean, pretty much. I'm just waiting for him to sign, and then I'll put Inter Miami at number 1 in the East. But until then, like there's just not much to like there, and it sucks that they couldn't keep Alejandro Pozuelo. He won't be there, so and he would have been perfect for Joseph Martinez. And I just don't feel like this team quite has it, and they're just really sitting there waiting for Messi to sign, so then they could bring in all of Messi's old dogs with him.
Yeah. That'll be interesting. If Messi signs, like Eli said, they're going straight to the top. However, speaking now and what they have, my question for them is how do they approach formation? Because now you have Higuain and Martinez on the same roster. Are you going to change from what they've been playing the last year or two under Phil Neville to a 4-4-2? So that they can put both these guys on the field?
Yeah, well, Higuain's retired, so he's gone. But they have Campana, who's good.
Right. Campana. Sorry.
Campana.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I got my names mixed up here.
Oh, no worries. But Campana, I think they will go like a 3-5-2 or something.
3-5-2.
They're going to start both Campana and Martinez. With Messi, man, I don't even know if you need to put him in a position. Just kind of let him do his thing.
Hey,
tell him to roam free.
Worked for Argentina. Yeah, honestly,
it did.
He drifts and he finds space and gets on the ball. That's a little bummer to hear. Phil Neville's still in charge of them. Hopefully he starts to take it serious because some of his comments about the league are a bit embarrassing. Cody, maybe this is where you copied Eli, because it looks like you guys have the same teams down there. You have Chicago dead last, NYC FC dropping, Montreal dropping, Miami's down there, and DC. I guess my question for you is, anything going to change with DC? Rooney, is there. He's opted not to bring big names, only one of people that's going to be there. He's really trying to instill that team above self. The clip I just saw was, preseason sucks. It's hard. You need to work hard. Like, this is a part of the job. It sounds like he's going to want his teams to just run and be hard to beat and just break down.
Yeah, I think that's a very British mentality. That said, I'm not sure how far that goes in this league. And that is coming from somebody who has played for a manager that brought that approach to New England. We really struggled as an organization, as a team, as a group of players with that kind of press mentality, because this league, in comparison to others, is very much an athletic league and is more athletic than a lot of the leagues in Europe. However, I think one of the big things for me, and every club that I've been at where you've had two quote unquote number ones competing for the job, I think it is difficult. It's not as promising as it sounds. I think with Tyler Miller and Alex Bono being there together, I think it is going to create a little bit of a
pick whose side you're on. They're not going to really support each other.
Correct. And that was a very similar situation to what was happening in Toronto last year. I don't know if you heard this, Eli, is that, Westberg and Bono wouldn't back each other up. So they had Ranjitsingh. If you look at the rosters, whenever Westberg would start, Ranjitsingh was his backup. Whenever Bono would start, Ranjitsingh was his backup, even though all three of them were healthy.
Hey, great for that third string keeper getting some roster time. That is wild. Anything you wanted to touch on with those teams at the bottom, Eli?
Well, I agree with everything you said about all those teams. It's funny. I've actually heard a similar type of thing from Alex himself, because I'm pretty close with him because the Syracuse connection. Yeah. I mean, he's not loving the idea of having to compete for the spot. He just wants to be the guy, which, I'd rather see him start as for a bias thing. I think Tyler Miller will be the guy though for them this season.
Wow. All right. Well, interesting how that will shake. All right, let us pivot. Oh, by the way, I want to bring in 538's predictions for the East. So 538, they're all about probabilities here in their data models. They do a lot of political stuff, but they do a ton of stuff in sports as well. They agree with you guys in the fact that they think, is this season? It was just updated February 11th, 2023. So sorry, I just had to double check because they've got Philly first with a 15% chance of winning it all, but they have New York City FC second. And I wonder if they're like Chat GPT and their data models are out of sync.
I don't agree with that. There's
Atlanta third.
Interesting.
I mean, they like to go with the big teams. You know, they want to put the big teams up high. That's just how it works with these types of sites. But
I mean, they don't even have Nashville in the top 8.
Oof, that's a little rough for me. I mean, I think
New England is 10.
Montreal, just inside the playoff spots. You guys had them at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. I'll be interested to see.
Well, either way, their top 4 are Philly, New York City FC, Atlanta, and FC Cincy, and then the bottom would be Charlotte, Chicago, Miami, and DC.
Very similar.
The bottom is a lot more similar than the top. I would say that.
Would certainly agree.
This updates for the season. We will check in on that. But again, pivoting to the Western Conference, either going right to the top, your top 4, you've got LAFC running it back, Austin FC continuing to fight as one of the top teams, FC Dallas, and Sporting Kansas City. Obviously, they were injury FC last season. What do you make of this Western Conference, at least at the top?
Yeah, I mean, it pains me to say it because I'm a Galaxy fan. I just can't stand LAFC. LAFC fans can't stand me. But this is their conference still. They're still, unfortunately, the best team in the league. And they got to be number 1. My top 3 is actually the same top 3 as last season. I don't think any team breaks into that top 3 personally. I think they're pretty solid and locked in there. And then Sporting KC, getting Alan Pulido back and Gadi Kinda back from injury is like 2 new signings. Plus, they already had an incredible summer window last year, bringing in Eric Tommy, bringing in Willie Agata. And I think, having that striker battle up top for who's going to start Agata, Pulido is going to be great for this team, unlike what we talked about for DC. I think that's only going to make them better. I think Sporting KC, if they could figure out their back line issues, because they're very thin there, I think they will be back to a pretty top team in the West. That's my thoughts on my top 4.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. In comparison, Cody, you also have LAFC, then Austin. You actually have Sporting in 3rd and Portland in 4th. Definitely a bit of a kick down on Dallas. So let's just focus on you having Portland in the top after them being not even in the playoffs.
Well, I think last year,
is it the new kit?
Yeah, it might be. The new kit might play a part in my decision. I'm not going to lie. The lumberjack look is very fashionable these days.
One of my favorite kits.
I would agree. Actually, it for us here in Minnesota, it really hits home with the whole lumberjack idea. Babe in the blue ox, right? But I do think Portland maybe not in 4th. Maybe it's a Dallas and Portland switch there. However, I do believe Portland will be towards the top end of the table, at least in the top half. I think last year they had some difficulties with injuries. Eli, correct me if I'm wrong with that. Yes. And hopefully they can keep guys healthy. And I think, like Eli said, with Sporting, it's like getting a handful of new signings back. I also think that they may have kind of had an identity crisis, having lost Valeri. Hopefully that is now, I guess, fizzled out, and they are able to find who they as an organization want to be without Valeri in their lineup or on their roster. But
Portland?
That's at Portland.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But as long as they can keep players healthy, I think that they are a team that can certainly push for the top 4.
Did Valeri go to Apple TV?
Yes, he is on Apple TV, and I'm very excited about that because I personally love Valeri, so I'm excited to see.
You said the same when we talked about the Apple TV stuff.
Yeah, I think he's going to be great. I think his mind sees the game so differently than a lot of other analysts. And I think it'll be similar to if you watch the NFL, like a Tony Romo breaking down a game and where he sees things.
He's in trouble, but I get your point.
Yes. He sees things as they're happening.
Yeah.
And can explain to, the average fan how and why a team is doing what they're doing.
Eli, yeah, as I say, so you're middle of the table here. You have Portland right there. Again, this is 5 through 10, so we're not necessarily rank ordered. Portland, Galaxy, Real Salt Lake, Seattle Sounders, San Jose, and Vancouver. So I think, if we kind of look at last year's standings and kind of who was in and around that, it looks like it's all a lot of the same names. I think the only one that has a big fall that's not in there is Minnesota, which we'll touch on a little bit, but it looks like you have San Jose taking a big jump from dead last this last season.
I think San Jose really improved personally. Now they have a new coach. The Almeida era is over. They have very exciting youngsters. They have a better backline. They even just traded for Jonathan Mensah, who I think was a big pickup for them. So I think they're a team to watch out for this coming season. I don't think they'll be MLS Cup favorites, but I wouldn't be surprised if they really, if they became a playoff team this year, which would be a massive success for this team. And then in terms of the other teams 5 through 10, I agree with you. Portland will be pretty high for me. They just miss out on my top 4. I think, they did find their Valeri replacement with Evander, who they got from the Danish league. There's a lot of high hopes for him. He's Brazilian. He's got the flair there. And then let's see, the LA Galaxy, my team, I'm definitely going to touch on them a little bit.
Nice
I'm a little
plug.
worried. Yeah, I'm a little worried about them this season, just, with losing a guy like Julian Araujo, having a transfer ban this summer, so they won't be able to bring in anyone. So the squad that they have right now is a squad that they're going to have all season pretty much. They could make interleague trades, but I don't know how game-changing that will be for them. But, a full season of Ricky Puig and Gaston Brugman will be really good for this team. So that's why I still have them as a playoff team. And then Real Salt Lake, they just always seem to find a way to make the playoffs, which is why I have them as like my 7th seed, basically. On paper, they shouldn't be there, but they just always find a way to be there. So I got to give them their props.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that is a very resilient organization, especially with Krylak coming back from injury.
Oh, that's going to be huge.
Do they still have that young goalkeeper?
No, not at all.
No, they do not. They have Zach McMath, who actually stood on his head quite a bit towards the end of last season and really helped them out.
Yeah, he was clutch.
Yeah,
last
he
year.
was.
All right. Cody, you've got Dallas, Seattle, Galaxy, LA Galaxy, Real Salt Lake, Vancouver, your former team, and then San Jose as well getting a lift. Obviously I want to hear your take on Vancouver because you were just there. You've seen what they've done, what they're trying to do. I did watch kind of the season preview on Apple TV with them, just kind of see. And so I'm, like I said, what are your thoughts on Vancouver and if they're going to make the playoffs, having just missed it last season?
Yeah, obviously, like you said, we just missed the playoffs last year. Obviously, it came down to a decision day result against Minnesota. That said, they have strengthened what I would call the spine of the team. Obviously, they believed that they needed to go out and bring in a goalkeeper on, quote unquote, big money. They have found their man. They went out and signed a goalkeeper from the J League. However, I think based on certain statistics that my loving wife has brought to my attention, I did not look too much into it. I do think the goalkeeper will struggle in terms of height. I think the game has changed. The league has changed a lot since the last time you saw 2 goalkeepers find success in this league that were of a similar height.
Which Hasal's not.
No, Hasal is 6'2", 6'3".
Okay.
Isaac Bomer's 6'1". And the new goalkeeper that they brought in is 5'10". I'm going to quiz you here, Eli. Can you tell me the last 2 goalkeepers that were an inch shorter and an inch larger than this new goalkeeper for Vancouver?
Oh, for Vancouver, because when I think a short goalkeeper,
there were two
all I could think of.
goalkeepers that were in the league.
Okay, well, Nick Rimando has to be one, right?
I would say Nick and I are both thinking Rimando.
Nick Rimando's one of them, right? And he had major success in this league as a shorter goalkeeper. However, who do you think the other one is?
Yeah, just about Nick Rimando. This J League guy is being compared as like the J League Nick Rimando.
Is that what they're saying? Okay, well, I certainly hope.
Time out. That's what Matt Doyle is saying. So like, who knows like what that if people actually say that.
Right. And for Vancouver's sake, I really hope that they have found their guy, because I think that this signing will speak to the demographic of Vancouver very much and help them draw a larger crowd, which they do need.
They do need. I'm trying to think of the other one. Is it like, how tall is Brian Rowe?
No, it wasn't Brian Rowe. I wasn't thinking of Brian Rowe. Luis Robles.
Oh, Robles, of course.
5'11".
Yes.
And I mean, the career that both him and Nick had were
incredible.
They truly were incredible. But anyways, Vancouver also signed a center back, which the club also believed that they desperately needed to play alongside Veselinovic or Tristan Blackman or whoever his pairing is going to be. And then they went out and signed Cordova, who was on loan to Salt Lake last year, but they bought him, correct? Yeah, he is.
I think he was Salt Lake's leading scorer last year, too.
Interesting.
Which could be a pretty rough spot for RSL.
Yes, it could be.
So is a different profile than Cavallini. I remember watching you guys last season. I kept laughing. The amount of penalties you guys would pull out of your hat was impressive.
It was.
But that's no way to like survive a league, obviously, which is why you probably fell short. So, in the doc, they're just talking about how, Vianney was, even throughout the season, who's tinkering, building, adding pieces constantly. So they kind of say like, hey, for Vancouver, this is his team now. He's gotten pretty much everything he's wanted. Yeah. He now needs to deliver because this is his big pressure season. So, we'll see how it goes, but it's going to be a bit of a hill for them to climb. At the bottom of the Western Conference, Eli, you have Houston, St. Louis, obviously the new to the league, which there's really never a lot of expectations on a new expansion team. Minnesota, my local market team, and then Colorado Rapids. I think that it's another bad season for Houston. Minnesota is to be a pretty big drop. Colorado's kind of, not really gotten anything to make anyone excited. And then St. Louis, again, expansion team, like, welcome to the league. Take your beating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to rank an expansion team because you really don't know how the roster is going to hold up against established MLS clubs. I think St. Louis, what looks like they've done a pretty good job. I just really don't know these players. It's very hard for me to predict a team where I don't know the majority of their players yet. Minnesota, I do want to talk about because I think their fall all relies on one player, and that's Emmanuel Reynoso. And in my opinion, being a Galaxy fan, having gone through the Pavone situation, I wouldn't be surprised if Reynoso never came back to Minnesota, which is why I think they have dropped so low for me. And that's a huge thing. And plus, they still don't really have a real striker or someone who can bang in 10 goals, which isn't even asking for that much. 10 to 15 goals. So that's why they dropped for me. Colorado, I've seen people rank them as high as like 3 and as low as where I've put them. I mean, when your biggest offseason move is bringing in Kevin Cabral, you've got to be worried. He was the worst player I'd ever seen for the Galaxy, and now he's over there. I'm very thankful that they did take him on. The one thing that I would say is going for Colorado is they have a fantastic coach in Robin Fraser. I think he is one of the most underrated head coaches in the league. But just looking at this roster on paper, I don't see this team doing much this year.
Yeah. I mean, I do agree on the, Reynoso factor, right? It's, if you look at New England, they didn't have Carles Gil last year and they struggled. When they had Carles, they were a much better team. I think that you look at Minnesota and the production that comes from a player like Reynoso, that has significant impact on an organization and whether they are or are not able to qualify for the playoffs and even compete for a playoff spot. I also think that, St. Louis is one of those teams where they're going to come in and they're going to take their licks. However, it's a learning curve. They're going to come in, they're going to take their licks. However, I do believe they have some talent on roster that will be able to, I guess, counterpunch. And I think that there are going to be some games where they shock a few teams, a few organizations. And I think that they will be a better expansion team than some of the ones we have seen in recent years.
I mean, Cincy's first season was rough.
Cincy's first 3 seasons were rough.
Well, I remember
I wanted to ask you.
Go for
Cody,
it.
I wanted to just ask you, and maybe you don't want to put this in the final edit of this, but when talking about like Vancouver last year, when talking to a lot of Vancouver fans, the scapegoat they used was Jake Nerwinski. I'm just wondering, like, he's projected to be the starting right back for St. Louis. What do you think about him as like a player?
I think he's a brilliant player. I think he is definitely, I think a lot of people used him as a scapegoat because it was the easy out. However, I don't agree with that. I think formation wise and formation wise, I'm not sure he was played in the position that best suited his abilities. Gotcha. Now, with that being said, he did make some mistakes. I made some mistakes. Tristan made mistakes. At the end of the year, it came down to, one, how we as an organization started the year.
Oh, yeah.
And 2, the mistakes that individual players made throughout our run into the final day of the season. Because we had an opportunity as a club to avoid a decision day game, a decision day result, a decision day elimination, but we did not deliver in the maybe 5 to 6 games leading into that final game of the season.
All the chips kept falling your way. I could not believe it.
I mean, at one point we had the worst start in league history, I believe. I mean, we had like 4 points from 9 games or something like that.
It was like 1-8.
Yeah, we were 1-9, I think, at one stage. And I don't think you can put it on Jake Nerwinski. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I'm not saying it was all his fault. I'm just saying from like Vancouver fans that I've talked to, they like always used him as like the number one reason why they were failing. I didn't necessarily believe it. I just wanted to ask you as someone who obviously played there. And I hate to say this, but I was there last year when you guys lost to the Galaxy 5-2, right behind you. But
in LA.
In LA, yes. I'm talking about that.
That wasn't my favorite game. Not gonna lie.
Did you throw the hot dog at him?
I did. I thought I felt something hit me in the head. Wasn't sure what that was.
That was not me, but yeah, I just had to bring it up at some point throughout the podcast, that I was there and I saw it, but I know you're much better than that day, of course.
I appreciate that.
I just want to ask on Houston. I mean, are they kind of like Chicago Fire? Like you just poking them with the stick meme saying, do something? You were there, 5 years ago now?
No, 2020.
Okay.
I was there in 2020, COVID year. So that was the bubble year. It just seems that whatever Houston does, it just does not work. Whether it's, managerial changes, player personnel change, ownership change, it just doesn't seem to work. And I don't know what the final piece of that puzzle is going to be, but I sure hope that they can figure that out and kind of restore themselves to former glory. Because when I was a kid growing up, I can remember watching Houston Dynamo compete for MLS Cup. And, it's kind of been an interesting evolution of the organization.
Yeah, definitely. It is at least nice that they have new ownership and the new owner seems to want to make the change. It's just, I look at this projected starting 11 and it's like, just every piece is like, okay on that team, but no one really sticks out to me as like fantastic, like A tier. There's no like there's no Carlos Heel. Hector Herrera is supposed to be like the star of this show, but he had a very rough year last year in MLS. And he's not really like a game changing player, a guy who's going to, really, raise the ceiling of your team.
I mean, he's a hard worker, and he's very industrious. And, I think he played on the outside. He played a little bit in the center mid, but he's not a creative player. He's an engine player.
Yeah. And he's not explosive. He doesn't, he doesn't score goals. And I don't think he produces goals like in terms of assists very much either. Yeah. And I just don't know if that's going to be your highest paid player, your franchise, so to speak, player, if that is what you want to, I guess.
It just seems like he's there to, he's there to fill seats. He's there to sell jerseys. Yes. That's kind of what he is. You don't build your team around a player like Hector Herrera. He is a great complementary piece, but they don't have a guy to really build around. And they have Sebastian Ferreira up top, but he's really got no one feeding him. They took a shot on a guy named Amine Bassi this offseason, but he doesn't have that fantastic of a resume, so we don't know how he's going to translate to MLS. And then we're waiting on Corey Baird to break out from his rookie season. It feels like every year he's a year away from being a year away. Yeah. And this is probably his last chance as like an MLS starter. I like him. I used to watch him at Stanford, but seeing his decline in production from his rookie season has been pretty rough.
Yeah. All right. Well, 538 has LAFC winning this conference. They actually have a 17% chance of winning it all. So they are the favorites before the season starts. Then their top four, they've got Austin, LA Galaxy, Seattle, which I think would probably surprise this group a little bit to have some of those teams that high. And then at the bottom, they've got Colorado, Real Salt Lake, Houston, and St. Louis, which really isn't that much of a surprise. They just don't give the eye test any love, Eli, because again, this is a robot running probability statistical models. So I get that.
My one argument for Seattle, and you tell me if you disagree, Eli, is that Seattle will compete as long as, again, another team in this division, as long as they can keep players fit. Last year, they had their injury woes, especially because they poured everything into the Champions League.
Which is worth it for them.
Which is worth it, absolutely, especially because they won. Mm-hmm. Now, if they are unable to keep players fit, I think it will be a struggle again. However, if they focus on Champions League and then the league, and they get a better start to the first half of the season, they will definitely be a competitive team again.
I definitely agree with that. It's just, this season's going to be the longest season in MLS history because for some teams, the Champions League, but then in the middle of the year, you got the Leagues Cup, which is going to take from it. But we still got 34 matches to play. So these players are going to play more matches. And I'm worried about Seattle and their health, which is why in my full rankings, I have them at 8th, not even in the playoffs as of now. Right. But that's my reasoning behind that.
For sure.
Totally get it. All right. Well, look, that's Eastern and Western Conference Finals. This has gone longer than I thought. So we're going to pause here. We're going to wrap with regular season predictions. And where we're back with next episode, we're going to do all the different competitions throughout this season, like the Supporter Shield, US Open Cup, MLS Cup, the new Leagues Cup, and some things like that with the individual awards, MVP, Defender of the Year, all that good stuff. So anyways, Eli, thank you as well. Links in the description. Go follow him as always. But we'll be right back the next episode with another round of reviews.